Is a wealth tax coming to Canada? Welcome everyone, I'm Michael here with Offshore Citizen, and at the moment in Canada, they have announced they're doing a federal election, which is coming up, and it seems that if the policies of certain parties get implemented, that a wealth tax may be on the horizon. So I'm going to talk today about the likelihood of that, whether it's a good idea or bad idea, whether it's like to happen short term versus long term, because I think these are going to be quite different. What other signs we are seeing, and how this might indicate the general trend in the world. And so if you're not in Canada, what that might mean for you. So we're going to talk all about wealth tax today. Before we do that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, nail the notification bell. Make sure to check out all of our other videos. I really appreciate your support. If you'd like help with international tax optimization, moving abroad, getting residencies, buying second citizenships, passports, etc., please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our website, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so the head of the NDP, that's the New Democrat Party, which was basically in the previous cycle, you had a minority Liberal government, and so the counterbalance of power was really with the New Democrat Party, the NDP. And so the head of the NDP has proposed a 1% wealth tax on Canadians over $10 million. One of the members of parliament from the Liberal Party has proposed a one-time wealth tax. They're suggesting they could raise 44 to 60 billion or so in revenue by taxing about 3% on wealth over $10 million. And the Crown, that is to say, the leading party, etc., in their speech start of last parliamentary session, so last year, announced that they were exploring ways to tax extreme wealth and inequality. Now, obviously, you can tell by this that apparently the definition in Canada of extreme wealth is around 10 million Canadian dollars. So to give some context, that's like 6-ish million euros of net worth, or around 75 or so, or 7.5 million, US dollars. So it gives you some context on what it is that they are considering in that area. Is this likely to happen? I think there's a reasonable chance that Canada may bring in a wealth tax. So I've mentioned in some previous videos, I actually think citizenship-based taxation is fairly unlikely. I haven't seen the trajectory for that. I haven't seen the precedent for it. And in fact, the precedent is the opposite. Countries that have previously gone that route have been on the decline. And so then we can ask, well, what about wealth tax? Certainly there's been 12 countries since I think 1990 in Europe who have tried wealth tax. Now there's only 4 of them remaining. And so it shows that it's been a generally unsuccessful policy. You can see, in example, France, where they've tested it on a variety of times. I think the last time they had it was in 2018. And they like their taxes there, but wealth tax hasn't worked out too well. So this should be a lesson for the Canadian government, for Canadian politicians, etc., but who said they're going to learn anything from the rest of the world? So if that's the case, why do I think that this is likely to happen? Well, a couple different reasons. First of all, it is really clear that there's a growing wealth inequality. Okay, this is just a fact. And ironically, this is driven largely by central bank printing of money, which is driving up asset prices, and so asset owners are benefiting disproportionately to the rest of people. So in that sense, maybe they should just stop those policies, and that would address, they would have no need for a wealth tax. But anyway, this being as it is, that's one factor. The second is Piketty, famous economist, who wrote, I forget what the name of the book is off the top of my head, but anyway, very famous book, kind of one of the largest studies in history of poverty and wealth, demonstrated that what they call R is greater than G, which is the return on capital is greater than the return on labor, and therefore you tend to get these growing inequalities in wealth. That's kind of his explanation. Now there's some counter arguments for that. There was some studies that came out of one of the other major universities that showed that most of that actually is accounted for by the cost of housing, and so that's a whole other conversation, but interesting to consider. I don't know, we'd have to dive into the validity of that kind of thing. But because of the fact that he basically proposed that the issue is the return on capital, it makes a lot of sense that more and more the attention is focusing towards not income tax, but wealth tax, right? Now, wealth tax is a really ineffective policy, as we've seen, for a lot of different reasons. One is people tend to avoid it, and so the combination of that and it's really difficult to administer and really expensive to administer means that in general, you end up with the amount of money coming in actually being less often than it costs you to administer. So that's one of the things that's worth noting. It makes it really tough for them to project really how much money would come in from a given tax policy. One time, maybe it helps to mitigate some of those things, but typically not all. But if you are in Canada, you should probably be aware of this. You should probably be thinking, okay, great, like a wealth tax may be coming. What can I do about that? Or do I care to do something about that? Next, it's of course kind of unfair because you can have the value of assets go up a lot in one year. You can end up paying a wealth tax on it, and the value of the assets go down the next year, and you paid a tax on wealth that no longer exists. So you have all these types of things, as well as the effects on the market, are not very good. So call that what it is. You can decide accordingly. Maybe at some point in the future they'll be able to tokenize assets and inflate assets similar to the way they inflate cash, and kind of have this tax in that way. Maybe that would happen. That would be a different conversation. But yeah, for those of you who are interested, if you're in Canada, that is the case, and probably around the world, my guess is that you will probably see more attempts at wealth tax. It's just what you can kind of think in terms of like mental models of the world is the growing wealth inequality will have an effect, right? Absolutely, we're going to see social and tax policy consequences that come out of that. The question is, how do you deal with it, right? And one of the things that's going to increasingly happen is people are realizing that the increase isn't coming from income, it's coming from assets. And so if the increase is coming from assets, well, what do we want to do? We want to tax those assets. Now, you can't get at it with capital gains because they aren't selling. And so as a result, let's get at it with a wealth tax. And so, yeah, I would expect that's the case. So the question then becomes, what do you do to protect yourself from that? Well, relocating is one clear example, right? This is probably one of the first times where relocating has really been sensible. What I mean by that is one of the few times in history, because oftentimes your income was geographically located. It's not to a large extent anymore. It's a lot easier to move. It used to be that the places you could go were not nearly as good. They are getting better and better, so that's an option. And you were in a position where there hasn't been this consequence, whereas now there is. So yeah, that's one of the ways. The other way that is often useful for you is you can utilize some sort of a trust structure. So I'd say these are the two tools you have at your disposal: relocate or utilize some sort of a trust structure. If this is something that you're concerned about and wanting to get around, if you're wanting to pay the wealth tax, well then by all means, that's a whole other conversation. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense. If you'd like help with any of those things, again, relocating, getting passports, residencies, etc., or coming up with tax optimized structures, etc., please reach out to me. You can book a call, comedy.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have questions or comments, please put them down below. I would really appreciate your feedback, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.